You're listening to Linux News Log, separating the Linux and open source signal from the noise.
Hey everybody, how's it going? I am your host Adrian, coming to you almost live from lovely Petaluma, California, here in Studio MC2 at QuickSurf Internet Studios. Linux News Log is a proud member of the Tech Podcast Network. If it's tech, it's here. Do feel free to head on over to techpodcast.com. Check out all the other technology-related shows over there as well. I'd like to encourage everybody to visit us online over at quicksurf.com. Please do subscribe to the show if you have not already done so. For those of you that have, thank you for subscribing and staying subscribed. It helps show support for the show. And with that, let's go ahead and get into the stories for this episode. Starting off over at iClarified.com, Pebble releases the Watchapp SDK for OS X and Linux. Now, the reason why I'm primarily including this is because it's available for Linux now as well. Pebble Watch is a new watch thing that has been released. I personally don't have one. It looks interesting. Anyway, the Watchapp SDK is basically allows you to do programmatic stuff with the watch app. So definitely check it out if that's something that you're looking to do. It arrives just alongside the firmware update version 1.1 for Pebble OS. The software update for the hardware brings the support for custom watch faces built using the SDK, as well as new options for disabling backlighting and vibrations, as well as fixes for iOS bugs if you are using it in conjunction with an iOS device. The SDK itself, currently you can just create watch faces, not build apps or other functionality, but it could be interesting to see what else comes of it from it. It is basically a computer on your wrist. So I'm curious to see what happens with it. From Linux.com, Red Hat's John Mark Walker has a blog post. The open cloud needs open storage. The open source leads the data center, says John Mark Walker, the Gloucester community leader at Red Hat. Okay, what's next? This is the question Walker plans to address in his keynote on Monday at Collaboration Summit in San Francisco, though he hints at the answer in this Q&A. So this is a Q&A between Libby Clark and John Mark Walker, and I thought it was an interesting read. For those of you who are not attending the summit tomorrow, this could potentially be an interesting read for you as well. So definitely check it out. From the H Open, Optimus support comes to the NVIDIA Linux driver. NVIDIA has released a beta version of its proprietary Linux graphics driver, which introduces some support for its Optimus hybrid graphics technology. However, in its announcement of the changes in version 319.12 of the driver, NVIDIA only mentions the Optimus support in passing. Only the documentation goes into any detail about the feature. So, according to NVIDIA, users need an X server version 1.13 and version 1.4 of the xrand-r command line utility xrander. The Linux kernel used with this driver must also be able to provide a number of specific interfaces, but the documentation does not list which Linux kernel versions provide them. So still a little iffy, it sounds like, but still, definitely something. If this is something you need, this is something you want to look into for sure. Let's see here. From ZDNet, the Linux Foundation unifies software-defined networking powers. This is from Stephen J. Von Nichols. Recently, he argued that there's been a lot of software-defined networking hype. It's also real and will redefine corporate networking in the coming years. The Linux Foundation agrees, and in its Open Daylight project, has introduced a community-led and industry-supported open-source framework to accelerate software-defined networking adoption, foster new innovation, and give it a more open and transparent approach. So, he's got some more commentary on this post. By all means, definitely check it out. From ZDNet, again, Windows 8 PC makers should tell users how to kill UEFI, a Linux group is demanding. This is probably not going to happen, but I'm curious to see what comes of it anyway. Hispa Linux, a Spanish Linux, we've talked a little bit about this before. A Spanish Linux group pushing for a European Commission probe into Microsoft's Windows 8 secure boot requirements wants all Windows 8 PC makers to outline deactivation options for the security measure. Hispa Linux, which represents 8,000 Linux users, first filed a complaint with Europe's Competition Commission late last month. We talked about that. And according to the complaint, they're demanding a preliminary injunction that forces Microsoft to remove all wording that requires hardware makers to implement UEFI Secure Boot to gain Windows 8 hardware certification. They also accuse Microsoft of using the certification to maintain its monopoly and stifling Linux. This is all, old hat we've already covered. But interesting nonetheless. From lilyputing.com, I saw this article here, and I thought it was pretty cool. UDOO, a $109 single board computer, is like Arduino crossed with a Raspberry Pi. Arduino boards are small, inexpensive devices that let you build things with sensors to control anything from a robot to a home automation system. The Raspberry Pi is a small single board computer that can run Linux-based software. But what if you want a board that can do both of those things? That's where the UDOO comes in. It's a single board Arduino compatible computer which has a faster processor than the Raspberry Pi, support for Android or Linux. So this has been launched as a Kickstarter campaign to help fund the project a couple of days ago. They've already blown way past their goal, which is pretty cool. That means that the first UDOO units could hit the streets as early as September if all goes according to plan. They've got some pictures here. This looks pretty neat. I would love to monkey around with one of these if only I had the time, which for me is kind of becoming an issue. From technologytel.com, a Linux-based Acer Aspire S3 Ultrabook has become available in Hungary. Coming elsewhere, we're not really sure. Having reached the venerable age of 1.5, Acer's Aspire S3 is no longer what you'd call a hot Ultrabook. And yet its specs are not exactly dated, including such goodies as old-school Sandy Bridge processors, Intel HD graphics 3000, and 4 gigs of RAM. It's actually not bad. Furthermore, there appears to be a brand new S3 model available in Hungary, the S3 371. This looks exactly the same as the original on the exterior, but beneath the hood lies a dark, dark secret. There's no sign of Microsoft's Windows anymore, and you get instead... dun, 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 the Linux OS. So pretty nice. Hopefully this will come about somewhere else. Be interesting to see. So anyway, that's it for this episode of Linux News Log. As always, everything we've talked about is linked up in the show notes. You can find those online over at quicksurf.com. Please do subscribe to the show again. Like I said, there's multiple ways you can subscribe. You can subscribe an OGG Vorbis feed, an MP3 feed, and a H.264 standard def video feed. You can also find us online at YouTube, Blip.tv, Dailymotion, and Stitcher Radio over at Stitcher.com. And definitely check it out. With that, I'll see all of you on the next episode. See you then. Bye.